Have you ever taken your whole house across the border? That's basically what we did when we took our Airstream from the US to Canada.
You're listening to Travel FOMO, a podcast for people self-diagnosed with wanderlust.
Welcome to the Travel FOMO podcast. My name is Hillary Houghton, and I am here with my husband and the one I love crossing country borders with, Jamin.
So good time, eh?
I did not know you were going to say that. I was like, I don't even know what you just said. Oh my goodness. This was really fun because we had been in Europe for a while. We're now RVing in the US, and it was fun to get to go to another country again and experience something kind of foreign.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun to have that feeling back of outside the US. I don't quite know all the particulars. We're going to have to figure this out.
Yes. And just discovering new places is just ongoing fun for us. And in this instance, we were headed from Glacier National Park into Canada and to Banff, which was one that we just kept seeing pictures of. And it's a Canadian national park. Yeah. And really beautiful. The thing that we found really interesting was that Banff is a city.
Yes.
It's a town, and it is also a national park. So
right.
Two different things. But you'll hear it sometimes referenced by people and it could mean either of those things. So that's kind of good to know. And both of them are in the Canadian province of Alberta. And so this was our first time, both of us, to be in Canada, which was really fun. And the town actually really surprised us because we loved the town of Banff and loved the amazing views that we kept seeing. Literally every direction you would look. Yeah. You would just look around and be like, that's beautiful. Oh my gosh, that's gorgeous. Wow, that's so pretty. It felt like being in a beautiful mountain town, kind of at the bottom of a ski resort kind of.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Everywhere views.
Loved it. There's actually a bus system there called Rome, and they do free bus rides down into town. And so there was a point where we were staying in a campground near there, and it only cost us $2 to get from the campground into town.
Yeah, it was great.
Which we loved it. Yeah. And it was just a great area. Incredible views from every angle. One of the most beautiful mountain towns I think I've been to in North America, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And I even feel like I've been to a lot in the Rocky Mountains just because my family grew up snow skiing, and still it was it just took my breath away. Oh my gosh. One of the things that we also did while we were in that town was we got to enjoy something called beaver tails, which is this dessert that they make. Kind of would you call it kind of like a funnel cake?
It's like a funnel cake, only it's one big piece.
Yes.
And it's flat. It looks like a beaver tail.
Yes.
Very original. But yeah, it's that same kind of funnel cake material, I guess.
And they put all kinds of different toppings on it. So you might get Reese's Pieces or maple syrup or whatever. But that's it's a thing. If you're there, if you are in Canada, you should get a beaver tail.
Yeah, really and good. If you want to see what one looks like, you can go over to our YouTube channel and check out the YouTube video for this week. We tried one so that we could tell you what it's like.
Exactly.
Just doing a service.
You're welcome, guys. You're welcome. But why don't you tell everyone about the national park, Banff?
Yes, so that's all the town of Banff, and the national park of Banff is just this incredibly beautiful place. It is Canada's oldest national park, so their very first national park was established in 1885. It is actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Canadian Pacific Railway ran through Banff and played a big part of establishing Banff. Once that railway was set up, it was kind of okay, we have a way to bring people to this really beautiful place to see this national park and sort of establish this town. You can still ride that train through the mountains. It's just so untouched. If you think about how early they got to it and said, in 1885, they're like, okay, we have to protect this land. And it's been that way, since then. So it's just amazing. It's very, very remote. A lot of people go to like snow ski and things like that. I think there was like when the Winter Olympics were in Calgary, which is like 100 miles away, a lot of the skiing was done there in Banff. And a lot of people will fly to Calgary and drive over to snow ski. We drove from Montana up, just an absolutely beautiful drive through some of the other national parks. There's Soho and Kootenay, and then to the north is Jasper, which we ended up driving through that as well. An amazing, amazing place. I could not recommend going more. It was, in my opinion, the closest thing that we saw to like the Swiss Alps in our North America travels. Like this had to be the most comparable. The Canadian National Park System allows you to buy daily passes, and they're good for any park. So you can, if you know where all you're going at the beginning of your trip, when you make your first stop to enter one of the parks, you can just tell them what all you're wanting to do and what days, and they can get you the right pass, so that you can do all the things you want to do, which is really convenient and nice, because then you just have the pass and you don't have to pay anymore. You're good to go.
Yeah.
So that's really a good job by the Canadians.
Way to go, guys. That's right. But I will say it's insane to try to get a reservation.
It was.
To Banff. Like, oh my gosh. We ended up camping in 2 different locations within this park. We camped at Lake Louise and we camped at Tunnel Mountain, but that wasn't really the plan.
Right.
Originally, we thought we would just camp at Lake Louise, but we ended up, okay, so here's what it looked like, guys. Me trying to get reservations. It's like March. Yeah, I think it was March. So yeah. We were giving ourselves we were getting online the minute they were going to allow us to get online to make a reservation. And so we had to look up when that was going to be. And on that day, I was working from home that day. I'll never forget. And I had my work computer going, but then I had my personal computer going, and I was waiting for them to open up reservations. And I did it the second it went live. And I was still the 23,000th person, 23,000 people in line in front of me. And I ended up waiting around about an hour before I could even get into the website. Mm-hmm. That was insane. I could not believe that. And we'd been booking other national parks in America. So I was familiar with this process of booking reservations and how, people were totally into national parks right now, but I had not experienced something like that. To see that, I remember getting down to being the 8,000th person and thinking wow,
progress.
This is really great. There's only 8,000 people in front of me. But it worked like clockwork, even though there was a ton of people before me. It really worked. And everything, it was just like I had read about, there's gonna be a ton of people in front of you. Just stay on the site and it'll eventually be your turn. And sure enough, everything, their website worked just fine. But we weren't able to get all 5 nights in one site. We had to do a little bit of both.
Yeah, we had to kind of move around. We started out at Lake Louise, and I think we were there 3 nights. It was electric only, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But it was still very, very scenic, beautiful, and firewood was included, which I thought was cool. They just had this massive stack of firewood at the front of the park, and it was you just go get you some firewood,
which is really nice because we couldn't bring firewood from anywhere else.
Right. We couldn't bring it from outside the U.S. into Canada.
Or anywhere from Canada, right? Canada
right.
didn't want you to disseminate firewood across their country.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. You're not supposed to take any from place to place. Yeah. So having it there was really nice. We were super conveniently located to Lake Louise and Lake Moraine to do the hikes there. There are other accommodations. There's Fairmont Chateau and Deer Lodge that are at Lake Louise as well, and they're right at the lake, like right at the trailheads. So if you're not RVing, there are spots for you to stay too. There is a shuttle that kind of runs around that area and will get you places. I think it's like $10 a person. But
one way.
Yeah, one way. So
crazy.
It's pretty expensive. But paying to park is also expensive, so you just kind of have to weigh that out for yourself. But it was really, really pretty. I remember like just being able to sit there outside the RV and just look up at these beautiful mountains, and then the Lake Louise area is really where you want to go. Like that's those, all the pictures that you see from Banff, of like the blue water and the lake. That's Lake Louise that you're seeing. And so getting to stay there, I just felt really fortunate that we were able to get those reservations and get to spend those 3 nights there.
So we were crossing the border coming from the U.S., and we were a little nervous about going across the border for a couple of reasons. We'd never crossed over with an RV. Actually, I don't think I've ever driven across the American border ever.
No, I think I've always flown.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So you've never driven across the border either. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the first time for both of us. We've never crossed over with an RV, which is different.
Yeah.
Because you carry so many things in an RV.
Yes.
We'd never crossed over with a pet, or during COVID. And at that time, even vaccinated people could be randomly selected to test for COVID when they were crossing the border. So for us, it was like just this uncertainty of like, what's it gonna look like? We didn't know if we would have to test, and if we tested positive, we'd have to quarantine for 10 to 14 days. Could we do that in our RV? What was that gonna look like? It was crazy. I was like a little worried about having to test, and then even though we felt healthy, you heard all these stories about like people not knowing they had COVID, Right, and I was like, of course that would happen to us. And we'd had some really bad travel days, so in my head I was like, this is going to be one of them. We'd thrown away a lot of items that we thought could be problems as we were crossing the border. I had some CBD oil. We had some alcohol, a little bit more than was the maximum allowed. Don't judge, guys. But then also just food. We had dairy food and meat and stuff like that you have to get rid of all of that stuff. You can't take that across the border. And if you're in an RV, if you live in an RV, chances are you have that stuff inside your vehicle. So we gathered together a bunch of things like weapons.
Weapons.
Like, well, we did have some pocket knives. You had empowered us.
Weapons.
For our national park.
Throwing stars.
We had some cigars, stuff like, tobacco, prescription drugs, Maggie's vaccination records, our dog, her vaccination records, our COVID-19 vaccination cards, vehicle insurance. There's kind of a bunch of things you might need to show them, and it's really good to get them all together. So we did. No. I felt really prepared, but still scared.
So were you anticipating... in my mind, what I picture you anticipating us crossing the border, we were going to be taken into like a station and set under a light.
Yeah.
And like...
Well, I thought they'd take Maggie away from us.
Grilled.
And then...
Tom Cruise would be yelling, "You can't handle the truth" at us. Like...
Okay, so we had seen some horror stories, though, on YouTube of other people that were trying to cross the border with their vans or their RVs, and it's not necessarily straightforward as it sounds. Mm-hmm. So, but I think what is the more difficult piece of it is actually getting back into the U.S., is what I think. Looking back, I'm like, I think that's really where the problem was. And the funny part is the people I'm thinking of are actually Canadian. So crossing that border, I think, is interesting too, depending on if you're U.S. or Canadian and which direction you're going. But why don't you tell people what really happened? The horror story.
Yeah. So we drove up to the border, And Hillary had diligently prepared everything
Yes.
through they have a great app where you upload all your documents, like your passports and your pets' vaccination records and all those things. So we got up, told them who we were, showed them our passports. We answered a couple questions about whether or not we had food or bales of drugs. And they opened the gate and they let us into Canada.
Mm-hmm. And did we get randomly selected to
No,
test for COVID?
we weren't randomly selected. They did not come into the RV. We weren't pulled into a station and questioned. We didn't have to give blood.
No.
And we were not waterboarded.
No. It's
they
pretty
just
successful.
let us into Canada.
Thanks, Canada. You were really good to us. What would you say to people, though, that are looking to cross over in their RV to go to Canada?
I would just say make sure that you've done your research and know the rules. Know the rules for what you can take into Canada and for what you can bring back into the U.S. Because they're different and there are limitations on certain things. And so just be conscious of what you have with you. Do take the time to do a little inventory of what do I have and what am I taking?
And that could include dog food.
Yeah,
that's not sealed.
Right. Yeah. And so there's restrictions around some stuff. So just look into the rules. Traveling with a pet always adds extra layers to it, from vaccination records, things like that. If you are a full-time RVer, just recognize that it's a little more complicated. I feel like if you're leaving the U.S. and you're like, okay, I'm going on a road trip to Canada, and you're not a full-time RVer, then you just don't put anything that's not supposed to go in your rig.
Right.
And you're fine. But if you're a full-time RVer, you've got all kinds of stuff with you that is your stuff that you have to carry all the time, and stuff that you might not think about, produce or CBD oils or firewood, stuff like that, dairy products.
Mace. I always carry mace. And you're like, yeah, you can't bring that.
Right. Yeah. So just look into it, know the rules. The rules are constantly being updated. I feel like every time you go in an airport, it's a little bit different. And I feel like the border crossing could kind of be similar. It was definitely for us because of COVID. Things were, rapidly changing as far as what was required. So just look into it. And if you know the rules and you're abiding by them, everything's going to be great and fine. And just be friendly to the people at the border and let them do their job and let them get you through safely.
Yeah. So one of my favorite hikes that we did in Banff, I would have to say, would be when we started out at Lake Louise, and we ended up getting to discover a tea house.
Yeah.
Which I thought was awesome.
It was really cool and something that we didn't experience in the U.S. And honestly, I didn't know was a thing.
I did not know it was either, but it's really a thing there. There's not just one tea house. There are multiple tea houses. And it was really funny because half the time I kept calling them a tree house because they're up in the mountains, and it just felt right to call it a tree house. But you're like, it's not a tree house. It's a tea house, meaning they serve tea out of it. It's kind of like an old cabin in a way.
Yeah.
But the one we went to was Lake Agnes Tea House. And you start at Lake Louise, which Lake Louise, just to reiterate what James said earlier, it's this beautiful blue lake, turquoise, blue, bright turquoise blue lake. And it is one of the very popular ones to visit while you're there. And so we started out there real early, I think 7 a.m., which was pretty good for us at that point.
We got up early. We had to pay, I think it was $13 to park in the parking lot.
Very proud of that. I did my research and I was like, we are not going to pay $20 to hop on a shuttle and then $20 to hop on that shuttle to get back.
Right.
When we could just pay $13 for a whole day of parking and get to park in a bunch of different parking lots at a bunch of different places. So I was really proud of that. You should really look into that because the shuttle always sounds like it's a cheap option, but it's not in this instance.
Yes. The trail was really busy, even though it was early in the morning. One part of the trail was closed because there were grizzly bears on the trail, but there was a way to kind of get around or reconnect with the trail from another way. So we did that. It just took us a little bit longer. And it was really this beautiful, beautiful hike. The trees and the mountains there are just a little different than they were in the U.S. We saw Mirror Lake and Little Beehive. We're on the way to the Lake Agnes Tea House. And the tea house, once we finally got there, it's at really the top of a waterfall, which is kind of incredible. There's a lake that leads to this waterfall, and right at the edge of it is the Lake Agnes Tea House. It's over 100 years old. It's so remote that the staff that work there live there. So they like hike in
so crazy
and stay for their shift.
When's your shift? Oh, my shift starts on Sunday and ends on Saturday.
Yeah. Well, and the other crazy thing is it's so remote. There's no electricity and no water.
Yeah, that's wild.
So they take water from the lake and boil it to make the tea. They've got a little bit of solar that runs like a few lights for them and stuff, but no actual electricity. The tea houses were put in place in the early 20th century to attract like wealthy travelers, to like get them to come out and do these hikes.
High maintenance people.
Yeah. And they're great.
We love
because we're high maintenance. They once a year a helicopter comes in and like stocks them up. So in the spring, like kind of when they open, because they close down for the winter, but kind of when they open in the spring, a helicopter comes in, brings them most of their supplies, and then everything else is packed in by either pack mules or by staff. And so you're reporting for your shift and you're having to bring up a backpack full of tea and other like little stuff,
or milk. I mean, it's probably like a lot of dairy stuff. I bet it's like, we're going to need you to pick up like 2 gallons of milk and hike it up.
Right. Bring it up with you.
Yeah.
And they actually have like this cool little program where you can hike their trash down, because all their trash has to be hiked out. And so you can volunteer to take some. And we did that. They gave us like I think it was like a jug of molasses, like an empty jug to hike down. And so we took it back out with us. That program is called the Tea House Helpers.
Yeah.
And there's cool. like a little hashtag. So if you look it up on Instagram or whatever, you can kind of see that. But it was so cool to like get to stop in the middle of the hike and have some tea. I think we had some like biscuits
I had like an apple crumble.
That's right. Yeah.
It was really good.
And sit there and look at this beautiful, beautiful lake in the Canadian mountains. We continued down the trail to Plain of Six Glaciers, and then that took us back down to Lake Louise. I think there's another tree house that we could have hiked to if we had wanted to go further, but at that point we were like, okay, we probably need to head back, make sure Maggie's okay and all that. But we hiked back down, and we were essentially on the opposite side of the lake from where we started. And then there's a trail that just goes along the side of the lake, and we got to hike that back. And hiking that trail back, I remember, was really cool because the water is so blue. Yeah. It's this turquoise blue, like nothing you've ever seen before. And there are people out there in these red canoes with the red Canadian flag on it, just paddling around out on this lake, and it's so still and calm. And I just remember seeing those red canoes out there and just being kind of in awe that we were there, and that we had just done this hike, and that we had found our way to this waterfall, where at the top of the waterfall there's a tea house where we had tea, and the weather was just amazing. The colors and the smells and the sights and like all of it just felt out of this world.
Yeah.
It was such a fun hike.
Did you feel like there was I just felt like there was a lot of people.
Yeah.
It was very heavily trafficked from the very beginning. We started at like 7 a.m. and it was like tons of people. You were never alone on the trail.
Yeah.
And then when you come back down, it was really, really densely populated with people. So many international travels, people speaking so many different languages, which I loved. And it felt so different from American national parks. Even though you do get a little bit of that in American national parks, but I just thought that was like, whoa. But it was like, there was a mass of people.
Yeah, I will say it was really crowded back at the trailheads and where like the lodges and all that. It was a battle to get
Yes.
to get up to the lake.
Yes, yeah, for sure. But fortunately, we paid that like all-day parking pass, and so we were able to like go back, check on Maggie, and then come back later in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And we got to see Lake Louise again. We got to go to Lake Moraine, which is nearby. It's definitely a drive. It's not just a little walk. It is a drive, but it is our parking pass applied to that same parking lot too.
Yes.
So we got to park there for free. But it is so beautiful. It's the same. It's a lot like Lake Louise, but I felt like it was much more quiet and like subdued, not nearly as many people. It's not as easy to get to. It's not hard to get to, but it does take a little bit more driving. And so it wasn't as like overrun with people.
Yeah.
And we got there and it was like evening and the sun was setting over the mountains and that water was popping blue too, just like Lake Louise. And they had like all of these colorful canoes. So you'd gone from like all these red canoes on Lake Louise to like all of these, just a rainbow array of colors on this other Lake Moraine. And it was beautiful. And I just remember that drive, which wasn't long, but that short drive from Lake Louise to Lake Moraine is so scenic. And I remember you were driving and I was like, honey, stop. It is so pretty. Like, we have to take a look at this. And I remember us pulling over at least once for me to take photos because I was like, this is really gorgeous. And it's just interesting because we didn't come across a lot of vehicles or anything. And it felt like not a lot of people make that journey, but it was definitely, it was worth it for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of just amazing drives, while we were there, we took the opportunity to drive the Icefields Parkway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it connects Lake Louise to Jasper. And so it's through Jasper National Park. Our friends Shannon and Greg had recommended it to us. Honestly, I hadn't heard about it before them. And we had dinner with them right before we left. And they were like, oh, you're going to be there. Like, you got to do this. And I was unaware that it existed, but it was incredible. It's about 150 miles one way. So, and with like stopping to film and take pictures and things like that, it took us about 4 hours to get from Lake Louise to Jasper. So it's a commitment. Like it's an all day thing, but so worth it. We had just been in Glacier National Park. If you listen to last episode, we talked about going to the Sun Road, and I wondered how close this would be. And going to the Sun Road, very narrow, you have to go slow, and like driving is a little tedious. But this huge, nice highway, perfectly paved, plenty of like massive pullouts, super easy to drive, super easy to enjoy, very, very enjoyable. Hardly any sharp turns or switchbacks or things like that. Just a nice drive through some of the most amazing country you'll ever see.
Yeah.
Huge glaciers, waterfalls, aqua blue lakes, wildlife along the way. I remember like on our way back, we saw this brown bear.
Yeah.
And he was just sitting beside the road. One thing that you'll learn if you're in national parks, if you see a bunch of people stopped on the side of the road, they're looking at an animal.
Yeah.
And this was the case. Like, we kind of pull up and we're like, oh, everybody stopped. I wonder what it is. And we just sort of slowly roll through, and there's this big brown bear, and he's just sitting there eating his lunch on the side of the road.
It reminded me of like that song that Winnie the Pooh sings, like in all of the Winnie the Pooh like stories and stuff, where he's like, bears love honey and I'm a Pooh bear. It was just so cute. Like it was like like so oblivious to everyone, so innocent and sweet. It was really cute.
Yeah, it was such an incredible drive. A couple things to think about, because it is such a long drive and it is so remote. There's not going to be cell service out there. You won't get lost because it's really just kind of one road. Like you stay on the highway, just don't get off the highway. And you'll be fine. But there was really only one gas station in between. And so you want to make sure that you fill up before you leave. I'd go ahead and stop and like top it off like in the middle too. And
that one gas station isn't even open all year.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine that road gets pretty gnarly during the winter. But during the summer, man, it was great. We made it to Jasper, kind of mid-morning. It took about 4 hours and we had left at 6:30. So it was about 10:30. So we walked around town and had like an early lunch.
And Jasper's kind of interesting too, because it's a lot like Banff. There's the Jasper town.
Right.
And then there's the Jasper National Park. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. It is.
It's a cool town though.
It was a cool town. Like,
yeah,
little stuff to do, cute places to eat. On the way back, we stopped at Athabasca Falls, and it was incredible. There are these waterfalls, and you really just pull in right off the highway, and they have a nice parking area. There were a ton of people, so like you're kind of fighting the crowds, but you get to walk in and see these just incredible falls that so loud, and they're just like this river just cutting its way through rock. It is incredible. We've got some footage out on the YouTube video. I can't even really describe it. Like, just go watch that part of the YouTube video. It was so amazing. And you just feel so small, like looking at that water just cutting through there and seeing those falls. Just so much fun. So much fun. And a really nice way to like spend a day where you're not having to like hike. I feel like we'd done a lot of like hiking, and it was nice to have a day where we could take Maggie with us and see a lot of beautiful stuff without having to like physically exert quite as much. But yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, very cool. Do you remember we stopped at a little lake on our way back? And we get out of the car and we're going to hike down to this little lake, and we have to go through a lot of brush and stuff to get down there. And we accidentally come upon a woman like using the bathroom on the trail.
She pooping.
I don't know what she was doing, but I do
know what she was doing.
We were like, whoops. It was like one of those really awkward moments, which later on I got to encounter from her perspective, which is really funny.
Stay tuned for that.
Oh man, but but then like I'd forgotten the bear spray inside the truck, and we didn't even make it all the way to the lake because the brush was like pretty intense, and I was like, this is not smart.
It was pretty heavily wooded, and you were wanting to get back.
I was nervous. Oh my goodness. If any of you guys can relate to that, why don't you guys like send us a note, travelfomopodcast@gmail.com, because I'm starting to feel like alone in my insecurities. But I feel like there are other people out there that, I mean, I saw a bear on the side of the road in this brush. Like, it's not unforeseen that there would be one down in all of this brush down by this lake. And so I just really struggled with like being nervous all the time.
I think there's probably a lot of people that feel that way.
Yeah.
And I think they just don't go out there at all. I imagine a lot of the people that would agree with your opinion just don't put themselves in places like national parks.
Yeah, well,
very often.
It happened for about 6 months. But it did get better. It did get a little better once I realized like how truly uncommon it is to encounter wildlife. It's actually really hard to do. The more we wanted to see wildlife, we started to realize it's really uncommon. One of the other hikes that I really liked was the ink pots. Do you remember that? Ink pots. So it was like a 20-minute drive outside the town of Banff, and it starts at the Johnson Canyon Trailhead, which is really popular. We started around 7:30, 7:45 in the morning one morning, and the trailhead is like really nice and well developed, like a big parking lot, really nice bathrooms. There's a cafe, and you go to a couple different waterfalls along the way, which is actually the really popular part where you see a lot of people. And I'm telling you, these trails are nice. Like at the beginning, when you're going to lower falls and upper falls, you'll see trails that the trail itself is paved. Mm-hmm. Like it's a nice trail. Like you could go running on it, and you could get somebody in your family out in a wheelchair and let them enjoy the falls. So that it's great for kids, great for families. If you need to have a kid in a stroller, this is the place to do it, There's also tons of really nice railings and everything. It just felt very safe. And so the lower falls it's also really beautiful. There's a tiny cave you can actually go into, and you bend over and you like crouch down and you walk through this little hole in the cave, kind of like this little tunnel, and it takes you to the other side where you get to stand crazy close to this powerful waterfall that will just blow you away. The water is gushing down so fast, you actually need to just be prepared. And you can see this as you're approaching it and as you're like going into this little tunnel, that like if I keep going, I'm going to get really wet. Because that's how close you are to this crazy water gushing everywhere. But kids love that part of the trail. You could tell that like kids were like, whoa, this is crazy. Because you just kind of like, you literally walk through this hole in the mountain. And you get to the other side where this waterfall just like pounding down. You can't even hardly talk to each other or hear anything because it's so loud and powerful. And then if you keep going on the trail, you get past upper falls, and there get to be a little less people. But these waterfalls are really cool too, because in the winter you can come and you can hike it, and all of the falls are frozen over, which is really cool because you can walk under the falls with all of their frozen ice and like with all these walls of ice around you. I think that sounds beautiful, but I'm not like a cold weather person as much. So I'm like, I don't know. I would totally do it, but I don't know that it'd be like my ultimate thing. But I would definitely go back to do it.
I think it would be really cool to go to Banff during the winter and ski. And I think that hike...
Well, yeah, snow skiing is totally different.
Right. But I think that hike would be really great to do because that part of the falls was a pretty short distance. So I feel like you could do it without having to freeze to death.
That's true. I guess I thought of it as being you having to walk much slower with ice everywhere. So it would take you a really long time, and it wouldn't be a very short hike. But we'll have to go so then we can know.
Yeah, we're going to find out.
But once we got past Upper Falls, we started to notice there was a ton of mosquitoes.
Oh, yeah.
And you guys, we are not being dramatic. These cows, holy cow. The mosquitoes were so big. It was insane. They were huge and loud and in your face and just everywhere. Yeah. And you almost went back to the vehicle.
It was miserable. I remember thinking like, I can't take this. Like I just want to turn around. This is not going to be worth, whatever's at the end of this trail is not going to be worth like putting up with these mosquitoes.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. And I honestly didn't know if we'd continue hiking or not. I knew that I was willing to, but I didn't know if we were really going to do it or not. It's pretty bad. And we had come across a couple from Toronto too, which was kind of fun because, it was fun to meet people, but then also they were really scared of bears too. And it made me feel so much better. And so they knew that we had bear spray and they were like, do you mind if we like walk with you guys? Which I was like, of course. It was like so nice. But the ink pots at the end of this trail were totally worth it. It's like this group of tiny little ponds that are up in this prairie kind of on a higher altitude as the rest of everything else. And it was beautiful. They're like really blue and green, almost more green, I would say.
Yeah.
And they kind of look like little pots of ink, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of interesting. They kind of like even bubble and you can see water and air bubbles coming up from the bottom of the ponds, and there's like the little bridge and all different things. You know what? I totally forgot. This is where we filmed a like what's in the bag.
Yeah, we filmed what we carry with us when we hike.
That's right, because each of us have like we always hike with backpacks, and we just thought it'd be funny to show people like this is what I think it's important to bring, and this is what you think is important to bring on a hike. And mine always consist of snacks, even though I'm terrified of bears. I'm definitely willing to take the risk because I love snacks so much.
Right. There's going to be a salty snack in there for whatever bear eventually takes you. We'll have some cheesy, salty, peanut buttery stuff.
So funny, isn't it? Oh my goodness. But overall, the trail was like really well marked too. I remember thinking that was like nice, you know, because I felt like in the U.S. they just weren't as well marked, honestly.
I agree with that. I feel like all the trails that we hiked in Canada, it was really easy to follow the trail and to stay on and to never worry like, is this the right way? Am I going the right way? Like, it was always really clear. Like,
comforting.
Yep,
yeah.
Here you go.
Yeah, exactly. I will say it was super busy on the way down, but all of Banff National Park was like that.
It was.
Like,
it's super touristy.
If it wasn't super early in the morning, you were definitely like gonna see a ton of people.
Yeah.
And that was the same. It was literally almost like a traffic jam. Like you had to try to maneuver around people to get, and keep in mind, part of this trail is up against a canyon wall, and you've got a railing, and you've got a river rushing below you. So it's not like the trail is as big as you want it to be. The trail is very defined and constrained.
Yeah. So
you have to maneuver through all these people. Anyway, I just thought that was something good to know because it could make it take a lot longer for you. So that's just something to be aware of. But yeah, man, I totally agree. I would come back in the winter, do that in the winter, but also snow ski in the winter. I think that would be incredible.
Yeah. Do you remember driving away from there? We were heading back to Banff and we saw that bighorn sheep.
Yeah, that was cool.
It was right off the side of the road. And in fact, I think we stopped and he just walked right beside us. Like he was on the road and he just walked right beside us. And I remember he looked so old.
He looked older.
Like a little old man.
He looked like someone from the Bible times. He looked so old. Yeah. Well, and the other thing about Banff is, and really Canada, it is true wilderness.
It is, yeah.
It is so wild, and it's so similar. It's the most similar that we saw to the Alps as like anywhere else in North America that we've seen, even still. And we went to a lot of other national parks after this. But I would say that we also we identified some pretty big differences between like camping in the U.S. versus camping in Canada.
Yeah.
Some of that is just really obvious. You know, you've got like speed limits that are different, you know, like you're used to looking at miles. They're going to have everything in kilometers. Even hiking, they're going to have your hiking maps are going to all be in kilometers, and you're used to looking at miles instead.
I will say, like, driving with the kilometer signs will sneak up on you. because the speed limit is like 53 miles an hour, which is like 70 kilometers. So you see a sign that says 70 and you're on a highway, and in your mind you're like, oh, 70 miles an hour. And I was constantly having to remind myself, it's not miles an hour, it's kilometers.
Yeah.
And slow down.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then like we said a minute ago, they've got those electric fences to keep the wildlife off of the highways, which is just so smart and safe for everybody. The currency is different. So you've got Canadian dollars, and with the Canadian dollars, the exchange rate kind of took us by surprise, because I think at first we thought everything was like so much more expensive. But then in reality, we learned that at the time that we were there, the exchange rate was actually really beneficial for us. And it was like 77 US cents would equal a one whole Canadian dollar there.
Yeah.
Which is like to our benefit. So that was nice. Just like in a lot of other countries we've seen, public transportation was really popular. So buses were pretty dominant and convenient, and heavily promoted. And generally, I know Lake Louise was like expensive shuttle, but in the city of Banff, it was like $2 to ride around town. Like, that's really cool.
Well, it was so nice to because the bus would pick us up and drop us off at the campground that we were staying at, and to be able to go into town and go to dinner and be able to have a couple drinks if you want, or do whatever, and then just ride the bus back and not worry about parking and not worry about driving and all that stuff. I was really grateful for that.
Yeah, that was really great. And if you think about it in US dollars, it would be like $1.50.
Yeah.
That's like nothing.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. And tons of people were using the bus. It felt really safe. Also, there were so many international travelers, and it was just fun. It was fun to hear people speaking in French, because that's one of the dominant languages in Canada. But also we heard like German and Dutch and so many different languages. It was really fun to hear all of that. And then the roadways there, I have to say, are really nice. Were they not? Like, so nice, wide, well paved. Even with all of the terrain that they have to deal with, they make it count. When they carve out a road, they carve out a big, nice road for you. And it made driving in an RV with a camper trailer, it seemed like a lot less stressful.
Yeah, it was much easier to navigate, I feel like, than a lot of the U.S. for sure.
Yeah. Also, do you remember the wildlife bridges they had?
Yeah, I thought those were great. Such a great way to keep animals off the highway and let them still be able to roam where they want to roam.
Yeah, and just to explain to people, a wildlife bridge that we're talking about is basically a beautiful scenic bridge that they created purely for the purposes of wildlife walking across the road safely.
Yeah.
And so you go within a tunnel, and it feels like a little tiny short tunnel. And it's really just a bridge that they've created, and up above it, it's all land, and it's got trees, and it's beautiful vegetation, and it actually feels really pretty. And you get to drive underneath it, but it's really for the purposes of wildlife getting to walk across it safely. I thought that was really smart. There's a lot of smart stuff they do there.
Yeah.
We kept learning RV lessons along the way for RV life. What would you say are some of the things that we learned?
I think one of the big ones here was know what you have going on. We arrived at Lake Louise, and we went and got in the site, and we got right where we wanted to be, got level and unhooked and everything, and then realized this is electric only. We don't have water. we need to fill up our water. And
we knew it. We just forgot to double check and remind ourselves.
We knew it going in, but travel days, I just think for us, especially in the beginning, we didn't account for how tired you would be just at the end of a day of hauling. It's not just like driving. It's a lot more difficult than driving, especially when you're not very experienced at it, which we weren't. Like, we're just getting into it. And so it's stressful. You have to think about a lot. Like, a lot more decisions have to be made when you're driving about like where you can pull into and pull out of and all of that. And so, we make it to a place, forget that we have to put water in. And I think we realize now about how much water we use. And we had some like 5-gallon cans of water that we could have just filled those cans up and used those to fill our water. But at the time we just didn't know. And yeah, so we ended up having to like hook the trailer back up and pull it over and try to put water in the trailer. And
then you got to know where to put the water.
Yeah. Yeah.
We were learning a lot.
Right. Our trailer had some modifications, and we weren't really clear on all the stuff that had been changed and rearranged.
Oh my gosh.
So where we were trying to add water wasn't actually adding water to our freshwater tank. And
were we adding water to like our gray tank? Is that what we were doing?
It was like essentially he had like plumbed it to where it just like was going straight into a tank. Yeah.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
Because we kept trying to use our pump, and we were like, the pump must be broken, or it must have frozen over with all of the problems we'd had with when we were remodeling during the cold season. It was like crazy freezing that we had dealt with because we hadn't winterized it well. And then like this happens and you're just, oh my gosh, I was just thinking, you've got to be kidding me. We're going to need a new water pump.
Yeah. I thought, man, it's just another problem, like just another problem.
Yep. But come to find out, we just didn't know where to put the water.
Yeah. Once you put the water in the fresh water tank, then the water pump can pump it out, and it works fine.
Yeah. What a relief, too.
Yeah. Yeah. When we discovered that that's what was going on, it was big. But it was pretty disheartening that on the day, like, to do all that and then still be like, oh, our water's still not working. And I just remember being so frustrated. And so, like, this is so much more work than I thought it was going to be. If you just keep at it, and learn from your mistakes, like eventually it gets to a point where it's like, okay, like we know what we're doing, and like it would have not been a thing had we, once you learn,
right,
then it makes it easier. You just got to get through the learning.
Yes. Yeah. Well, we were making our way to Vancouver after this trip. And so Banff was incredible. We were going to see a little bit more of Canada. And on our way, we are going to experience our first ever night at Harvest Host Campsite.
Yeah.
So that is up ahead. In the next episode, we will check out Harvest Host. If you guys haven't heard of it, it is an annual membership that allows travelers to park their RVs and their camper vans at various businesses across the U.S. and Canada. And so that could mean like farms or wineries or breweries. And so we ended up staying at a cider brewery, I guess you could say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like cider place. Basically an apple orchard is what we stayed in, which was really cool.
It was cool.
It was blazing hot, and we'll tell you more about that in the next episode. And we'll tell you more about our Vancouver experiences. Oh my gosh, that reminds me, we like drove into downtown Denver with the Airstream.
Vancouver.
Not Denver. Downtown Vancouver. Oh, that was crazy.
Yeah.
That was not intentional.
Nope.
But once you get across that bridge, there's nothing you can do. Oh man, guys, good stories I've had. Another incredible travel days up ahead. So, but before we go there, we want to let you know about where we are on social media. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. We are out there. We've got videos on YouTube that you can watch to pair up with these podcasts and help you understand what is really happening, to kind of see the things that we're talking about. And then you can also follow us on the social media channels. It's a better way to stay connected. There's a little bit more opportunity to engage there. So come find us on those channels so we can start building a relationship with you there.
Another great way for you to connect with us is through our email. It is at travelfomopodcast@gmail.com. You can reach us there, drop us a story or tip or trick that you have about traveling to Canada or in an RV or anywhere in the mountains. Tell us your favorite spots to go. We would love to share them with everyone here. You can type your stories up and we'll read them. Or if you would like to record a voice memo and attach that to an email, we'd be happy to play that on the podcast too. So reach out to us that way. We're excited to hear what you have experienced and maybe the lessons learned that you have for us.
Yeah. We've got a lot of learning yet to do, guys. So teach us. Okay, guys. On that note, we will let you go because life is short.
Wonder well.